Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Last week I think we planned on finishing used water, but I don't think we actually finished every part of it. You guys said the last thing we talked about was the hadith from the Prophet ﷺ saying that the person shouldn't make ghusl from the same container as his wife, or from the leftover water of a woman, and the woman shouldn't use the leftover water of the man. So if that was the last thing we talked about, so the point of that was the intention that they say that you can't use used water for ghusl or for any sort of Tâhârah. And the point of that is, it's the opinion that we said that they say that that the water is still Tâhir. It doesn't actually become najis, but at the same time you can't use it. So we said that some of the ulama say that there's three types of water. One is called Tâhir, one is called Tuhûr, which means it's Tâhir and it can be used for Tâhârah, and that the second type of water is Tâhir, and so meaning obviously it's Tâhir but it can't be used for Tâhârah, and the third type is Najis, meaning if you touch it you have to wash it off and you obviously can't use it for Tâhârah. So we had already talked about the opinion that it's Najis and the evidences, and I think everyone had kind of agreed that that's a weak opinion and the evidence isn't very strong for it. So we were just finishing up the evidences about the second opinion. So the last hadith that you said, it was when the Prophet ﷺ forbid a man and a woman using the leftover water from the opposite gender. So the way they use that is they state, obviously, there's no reason for the water to become najis, so we still say it's Tâhir. But when the Prophet ﷺ forbid these two categories of people from using the water from the other one, there's some reason behind it, and the reason behind it is that it doesn't actually give you Tâhârah. So that's their argument.
But doesn't
it can't give you Tâhârah. So they say when the Prophet ﷺ forbid it, for a man to use leftover water from a woman and the opposite, they say the reason for that is because it won't make you Tâhir. You can't use it for wudu and for ghusl.
Why? It wasn't clean?
That's what they say. They say, well, it's not najis because nothing najis fell in it, right? So they reject that opinion, but they say if it was still good for using, why would the Prophet ﷺ tell you not to do it? So that's what they say. So they say the reason is because when someone uses water, it loses the condition of being able to remove
filthy,
hadath.
You mean like it's kind of like filthy?
No, that it doesn't remove hadath anymore. So say I use the water, and then a woman wants to come use the water. If she makes wudu, she's not on wudu, because the water doesn't have that ability anymore to make you upon wudu or upon ghusl. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean, but what makes the water not?
They say that you used it.
Okay, so that's the
second opinion. It's in between of the two. It's not najis like the first one, but also you can't use it for Tâhârah.
Okay.
So they say that's the argument that they make.
Yeah.
And they use that hadith because they say, well, why would the Prophet ﷺ tell you don't use it? If it was still good water, why would he tell you not to use it? That's the argument. And then next they also use the hadith that we talked about a bit earlier from Abu Hurairah. لا يغتسل أحدكم في الماء الدائم وهو جنب قال كيف يفعل يا أبا هريرة قال يتناولها تناولا. Or that from Abu Hurairah that the Prophet ﷺ said, none of you should perform ghusl from standing water while he is junub. And the hadith is narrated by Muslim. So they say that when the Prophet ﷺ said that you can't use the water if you're on janaba, to not use water that's not flowing, so don't jump into a pond and use that water, if that type of thing. The reason for that is because it becomes unusable by you jumping into it, so no one else can use it. So that's the argument. So they use this hadith as well to prove that.
But if you take from it and then you do ghusl on your own,
that's why he says you can.
That's what they say. Yeah.
Just don't jump. Don't.
Yeah, take
all the water.
Take it out.
Because they say once you use all that water, even if the water's technically clean, it's not usable anymore.
Because you just contaminated it, basically.
Well, they don't even say necessarily that you contaminated it. They say that you used it. Once it's been used for Tâhârah, you can't use it anymore.
But that's for like submerging your whole body in it, or is that like you just can't use sitting water whatsoever?
They say that you can't use the water. Like you can't, because if you submerge yourself in it, it's all been used now.
Yeah.
That's the
How
argument.
about like you can't even take from it though, they say, or?
Well, I mean, you'd have to, right? That's otherwise it
Yeah,
would be,
so,
you wouldn't be able to do it even then. There'd be no way to use water then,
yeah.
unless you scooped it with a thing and took it. And I mean, but it becomes kind of too much work then,
You can jump into a lake and all of it.
That's what they say. Oh no, a lake. I mean, that's kind of, even though technically it's not flowing, it's such a large amount that it wouldn't affect it. That's the second opinion, and we'll talk about later whether you guys think that's a valid opinion or not. They also say that if used water was something that was still able to make Tahârah with, then why didn't the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba recollect the water that they were using? So after they made wudu, why didn't they make an effort to catch all the water all the time? So they say if it was still usable, they would have tried to catch all this water, because they were in a desert and the water was very scarce. So to not use the water shows that it wasn't usable anymore. So that's another argument. And then another thing that they state is that we know that if you wash Najâsah with water, it would become najas and you can't use it anymore. So if you're washing yourself for wudu, then they say, well, it takes the same ruling.
Right, it's not najis, but it's not clean.
That it's not clean either.
Yeah.
Or it's clean, I mean, you don't have to wash it off of you, but you can't use it for making any sort of tahara. What do you guys think about those things so far?
Well, I have one question for
Yeah.
you. Let's say I have a bowl of water and I'm going to use it for wudu, and it said like I dunk my hand in it to wash my hand.
Yeah.
But then after, like, I can't even use that water anymore, basically, or what?
Some actually said that, yeah.
Like, so if I were to just stick my hand in it just to wash it off.
To use it, yeah, they say, well, it's
Then that
used now,
water's
you can't use it
unused.
anymore, yeah.
Yeah, but it's very weak.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. I see it very weak.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, because the other evidence that shows in the Rasul, like if the one about when you have a little bit of water in your beard, you can use it to wipe over your head.
Yeah.
That's another. I mean, you're reusing the water.
Yeah.
And what do you call it? And even like the hadith about the Rasul, like when they used to collect all the water from his wudu.
Yeah.
Like.
Well, they'll say for that, well, this shows it's not najas,
Yeah,
but they
but-
didn't use it for tahara though.
How do you know?
Well, they say, well, you have to prove it though.
You have to prove that they use it for
That
Yeah,
you-
that's
they
what they would
used
say
it?
for that.
Yeah. If it's not najis, then you can use it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If it's not najis, you can
Yeah.
use it. I don't, like, is there another condition that you have to use something like clean?
Well, they say that if it has to be ma' mutlaq. Remember we talked about in
Yeah.
the beginning?
Yeah.
So if it's used, it's no longer mutlaq. It's not ma', it's ma' musta'mal.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of that?
But the thing is, what about the hadith where the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Aisha, they use the same cup with the ghusl?
That hadith, he ordered the man not to use the knife for his wife. So it's the other way.
No, I'm saying, he's saying once you use that mic, it becomes najis.
No, it's not najis. They don't say it's najis. They say it's clean,
tahir, so it's in
Unusable.
between.
but you can't use it.
It's
No, I
not
mean-
najis, so because if it was najis, you have to wash it off of you, right?
Okay.
And if it's tuhûr, you can use it even for tahara. They say it's in between.
It's tahir.
You don't have to wash it off of you, but you can't use it for cleaning yourself.
because of the hadith.
So what does it then become?
They call it tahir.
So are these the only opinions? Like, there's no opinion that says otherwise.
No, this is second. There's
The
a third
second opinion. The
Oh,
third
okay.
opinion, but we're almost there, is that it doesn't matter if you use it or not. As long as it's water, and you
Water,
can
it's
use it.
water, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it? Oh, okay. We'll have to look at that one.
So you guys aren't convinced by this?
I'm
No,
not.
I'm not really
I'm not.
convinced. of
Okay.
that.
Another thing they say is that it's musta'mal, so it's been used obviously for a worship, right? Like wudu is a worship, and ghusl is a worship. So you've used it for that. You've used this water for that. So they say that's like, for example, we know that one of the ways for a kafara is that you free a slave, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they say this freeing a slave is a ibadah. And obviously everyone would agree with that.
Yeah.
So if you free a slave, you can't free that slave anymore. You can't use him again for that
okay.
ibadah. What do you guys think of that?
You can't
Well,
film
that's
again.
clear, yeah. That's once it's freed, you can't free him again. Obviously, that's clear.
So they
yeah.
say, oh, this is something
used
used
for
for a
using.
worship, and this is something used for a worship, so you
Yeah, but
can't
it's
do
two
it again.
different things.
Exactly, they're not even related,
Yeah,
really.
they're not related. I mean, it is ibadah, but everything is ibadah.
Well, because then you could just say, well, you can't free him anymore because he's not a slave. That's why.
Yeah.
How can you free a slave who's not a slave? It's not. It can't take place even, right? So they're really, like you said, they're not even related. But that's something that they use. But I mean, sometimes, so you see, sometimes the arguments how weak they are. You know? So that's the second opinion. So you guys don't seem convinced by that either. So now we'll talk about the third opinion and the evidence. And some of it we already talked about, so it won't take very long. So the third opinion is that it's tuhûr, and it's not makrûh even to use it. So it's not disliked. Having used water and using it for ghusl or wudu is just the same as having water that's never been used. It's not disliked for you to use it. It purifies you the same way, and there's no need to stay away from it. And that's the opinion of Ibn Hazm and Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Abdil-Hâdî and Ash-Shawkânî. So they were, so that's 4 ulama, and then like some who came after them took that opinion that water that's used doesn't make a difference. It doesn't affect it in any way, and it's still usable. And they use the hadith that we talked about earlier. First, the hadith from Aisha radiallahu anha that we actually mentioned it a few times here, where she would make ghusl at the same time as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the same container, and that their hands would pass each other while they were doing it. So one person. So they were using it at the same time. And also the hadith of Abu Hurairah, where we talked about as well, that when the Prophet ﷺ met him in the street and he left or he slipped away, it's because he didn't want to make or return the salam or give the salam to the Prophet ﷺ. So when the Prophet ﷺ saw him later on, he asked him why, and he told him he was on janaba. So the Prophet ﷺ said, Subhanallah, inna al-mu'min la yanjus, or that he doesn't become impure. So they say, if something's pure, why does that going in the water now change it to something that you can't use? Just like if you had some water and then you put a leaf in it. If it doesn't change the water in some way that makes it unusable, this is Tâhir touching another Tâhir, and all of a sudden it becomes at a different level. It doesn't make any sense. And then you use a weak hadith as well from Abdullah bin Abbas, who said, اغتسل بعض أزواج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في جفنة, or in a container. فجاء النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ليتوضأ منها أو يغتسل فقالت له يا رسول الله إني كنت جنبا فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الماء لا يجنب. From the authority of Ibn Abbas, that one of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ was performing ghusl from a container or from a basin. So the Prophet ﷺ came and he wanted to make wudu from it. So she said, Ya Rasulullah, I was upon janaba. So he said, the water does not become junub, or the water doesn't become upon janaba. So meaning, you using the water when you're on janaba, doesn't affect it in any way.
Who's that hadith narrated by?
By Tirmidhi. Yeah, it's an authentic hadith. Yeah.
Is it authentic?
Authentic.
You just said this. They call a weak hadith.
Oh, I was sorry. I was thinking of a different. It's from a different topic about the mixing. So I was thinking of a different one. It'll come in probably next chapter.
So this is not.
This one is
hadith.
this. Yeah, this I was made a mistake. Yeah.
So this is authentic.
This is authentic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because there's another one where one of the Prophet's wives was and he and her would make ghusl from a container that had leftover what do you call it? Dough, the ajeen. So but that's a weak. I was thinking of that one. So that's the third opinion. So what do you guys think of that opinion and the evidence?
Yeah, I mean.
So then he ended up making wudu from that.
He ended up making wudu from it, yeah.
Well, that's it just proves that if it's authentic and
Yeah.
she was in janaba, that's
Yeah.
probably the strongest evidence.
Yeah.
It's not that she was making wudu, like she was in janaba, so she was like.
Yeah.
To me, that's
Especially
enough.
because he he specified, I did it I used it for the to do a ghusl from janaba, and Rasulullah said, yeah,
He's
still
using
okay.
it for wudu, yeah.
And in the other hadith, when he forbidden the man from using it, there is no any reason why he forbid the man from using it. So there is no reason for that. So Allah Alam, what's the reason for? It's not clear why he forbid the man and the wife from using it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that does it make sense?
It makes sense, yeah. So I mean, obviously we have the Prophet ﷺ doing it, so we know it's acceptable.
Yeah.
So the only thing is, well, what about the other hadith where the Prophet ﷺ told us not to do it?
Not to use it.
Is there explanation from that? Like
The strongest thing is that I've seen is that it makes it to be disliked to do. So it's valid, but it's better for you to stay away from that if you can. Because that's a rule. Like if we have two things, like if we have an order from the Prophet ﷺ, then that we'd say that it's obligatory, or if we have a forbiddance from him, then it's haram, until we have another evidence that changes it. And sometimes it might change it to be makruh, or sometimes it might change it to be actually halal, and we'd say that this was just a recommendation, or that it's mansukh. I mean, so there's different ways that it would change what it means. So here we have clearly the Prophet ﷺ is telling us not to do it, but then doing it himself. So what does that mean? The strongest thing that I've seen is that it's something that it's makruh, and the reason for it that they give is because the more you use water, then the more unclean it would become. But even that I don't agree with, because then why would it specify a man and a woman? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it would be, we just say that a man using the leftover water from a woman, and the opposite is makruh.
So there is no explanation of the hadith that says what's the reason, or why they were forbidden, or what's the state, what their status, or.
No, we used it before. Some say that what it means is because once you use the water, it makes it unusable now. Right? Like the second opinion we talked about. They say, well, if you use it, the reason why you're not supposed to do that is because once you use it, it's ma' musta'mal, and it can't be used anymore.
Yeah.
Others say no, it can be used, but it's makruh, and that, to me, it seems to be the strongest opinion.
Yeah.
And then the fourth opinion is that it's makruh to use, and they use kind of the same thing, that they say that we have evidence proving that the Prophet ﷺ did it, and we have evidence that the Prophet ﷺ forbid it, and forbid jumping or performing ghusl from standing water and these types of things. So since we have contradictory evidence, what they say, that it makes it makruh to use. And that's the opinion of the Mâlikiyyah. So Allahu Alam, the strongest is that if it's a man using leftover water from a man, there's no karâhah in it, because there's no text from the Prophet ﷺ telling us not to do it. And if it's between a man and a woman, then it would be makruh to do.
Yeah.
But they're both still valid, though.
They're still valid, though, yeah.
So that's the strongest opinion there is out there.
To me, it seems like it.
The man for the man, there's nothing.
Because we have nothing to prove that.
Yeah.
So we would say about using standing water and making ghusl janaba, we would say, yeah, we're not allowed to do that. But the reason for it is because the Prophet ﷺ told us not to do it. It's not because the water becomes unusable, or because it's used, so now it changes it from Tâhir or from Tuhûr to Tâhir or any type of thing like this. We just say we're not supposed to do it because he told us. But to start giving explanations and it changes the water, and it's because then if you jumped in it, then part of your body is washed and the other part, it gets into, well, where are you getting all this stuff?
Yeah.
So it's khalas, like pretty much the strongest opinion is it's pure to use in any way possible, unless it's a man and a woman, it's makruh.
Yeah, but it would still be valid for you.
Yeah, but that's the strongest.
That's to me it seems like that.
So then using your own used water, obviously most valid, then, right?
Yeah, because there's nothing.
It's you. There's nothing. No one
Yeah,
else uses your own.
Yeah.
And even it says that when his wife was making a ghusl from the basin, and she was on janaba, so that's like if you're on janaba and you make ghusl from the water, you can reuse it for wudu after.
Yeah, and you could use it for ghusl, and because it's still.
Water,
yeah, it doesn't change it in any way.
Okay.
So which one is got the higher rating for its status? The one where he did ghusl with Aisha, or the one where he said don't share water from the opposite sex? Which one's got a higher standing?
Like the authenticity wise, you mean?
Yeah.
The one where he made ghusl from the same container.
Okay, that one's like how much? What's the difference?
Well, they're both authentic though, so we would accept them both, and it would for as-Sunnah, if it's authentic, we accept it, and we put them at the same level.
Okay.
those are also which hadith? The one that said that use the same water as Aisha?
Yeah.
But and then other hadith is saying what?
But
that don't use the same water
don't
as your
use
wife?
from the opposite sex.
Like a man using a woman and a woman using a man.
But you just explained that the reason being is because it's disliked. This doesn't make it invalid, but it's because it's disliked, so that's why he told us not to do it.
Yeah, so if we have two things, for example, that appear to us to be contradictory, we don't necessarily have to look always to which is a stronger hadith if they're both authentic.
Yeah.
If one's weak, then we have no problem. We get rid of it because we don't deal with weaker hadith. Yeah. So that's the end of that topic. So we know that having used water is something that's valid. And another thing that they say that's a very strong argument to me is they say, if you say you take water out of the thing and you pour it on your arm, and once it hits here, it's already used, right?
Yeah.
So by the time it gets here,
it's not used. It's
used already. So why is it valid for that? I mean, that's to me seemed very.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna say, because then you'll have to start saying, well, no, it's because you have to do it if it's a different wudu or if it's a different. I mean, then you start thinking like.
Yeah.
You're just now, grasping at things to try to have an argument, Okay, so the next topic is the water that's mixed with pure things. So this would be water that's mixed with, leaves or sand or sticks, whatever it is, or if you happen to be mixed with soap or shampoo or anything like that. So that's the next topic. So I'll just read what the author says. He says, this category includes water that has been mixed with substances like soap, saffron, flowers, and so on. That is, objects considered pure by the Sharia. Such water is considered pure as long as it has not been so mixed with other substances that it can no longer be called water. If this is the case, the water is still considered pure, but it cannot be used for purification. So what he's saying is that if you have water and something mixes with it, we can still use it for wudu and for ghusl up until the point where you no longer actually call this water. So say like an example that they give is say you had some water and some ink fell in it. If a bit of ink fell in it, it's still fine. If it would be fine up until the point where you don't call it water anymore. Now we just call it ink, or it's watery ink. So until it changes into something else, we don't even call it water anymore. Up until that point, you can use it.
Okay.
So that's what the author's saying.
So the same thing with the dirt in the water. If there's a little bit of dirt in the water,
it's a little bit dirty. Yeah, if there's algae in it, like sometimes you go to lakes and it looks dirty, but we know this stuff is Tâhir. So as long as we're still saying this is water that has algae in it, and as opposed to saying this is algae now, completely or whatever, that's wet. Yeah, then it's still usable. So then the evidence that he mentions, he says the hadith. He says, لما ماتت زينب بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اغسلنها وترا 3 أو 5 وجعلنا في الخامسة كافورا أو شيئا من كافور فإذا غسلتنها فأعلميني قالت فأعلمناه فأعطانا حقوه وقال أشعرنها إياه. And that's from a hadith from Atiyah. So from her that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ came to her house after his daughter Zainab passed away, radiallahu anha, and he said to the women, or he said to Atiyah, wash her 3 or 5 times or more, if you see fit to do so, with water and dry leaves or from the trees. And then for the final washing, use some kafur or something from kafur. And when you're finished, inform me. So she did that. And then when she told the Prophet ﷺ, he gave them a garment or like an outer wrapping for his daughter, and then he told them to wrap her in it. And then he says this hadith is related by the group. So we said the group is the 6 books, so Bukhari, Muslim, and then the 4 Sunan. So the point of mentioning this hadith is that when we know that ghusl requires water, but here the Prophet ﷺ told them to put stuff in it, which originally was like these types of leaves, and then in the last to put something from kafur, and kafur is camphor. It's like a
flower, isn't it?
I think it's a flower, yeah. It has like a strong smell, yeah. So obviously the point of that was to make the water smell nice. So the water would have changed a bit. It would have a different smell, but because this thing was something that was Tâhir, and it was something, it didn't change the water into another substance, it's still obviously water, then this doesn't affect the
usage.
So that's the first evidence that the author uses. And then the second, he says the deceased should be washed with something that may purify a live person. So meaning that when we're washing someone who's passed away, we don't then say, well, we can use something that we don't use for a live person, because we're performing ghusl in the same way that we would for a person who's alive. So we wash their hands and then pour over their private area and then wash, perform wudu for them. So the point of it is the same. So we know that the ruling for the dead person is the same as the live person when it comes to what can be used for ghusl. So the fact that this stuff was used for the washing of Zainab proves that it would be allowed for someone who's alive as well, unless someone can prove that it's not like that. So that's the first hadith that he mentioned. Then he says Ahmad and Nasai and Ibn Khuzaymah recorded from Hanâ, and then he mentions the hadith أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اغتسل هو وميمونة من إناء واحد في قصعة فيها أثر العجين. Or that the Prophet ﷺ, or the Messenger of Allah ﷺ and his wife Maymuna made ghusl from a container that had traces of dough in it. And so the author says, in both of these hadith we find that the water was mixed with another substance, but since the other substance was not substantial enough to alter its nature, it remained fit for consumption. So just the first hadith obviously we know is authentic. It's narrated by the group. So
is authentic?
It is authentic, yeah. The first one. So from from Atiyah. The second hadith is narrated by Ahmad and Nasai and Ibn Khuzaymah, but it's a weak hadith because the person who narrated it from Hanâ was Mujahid. His name's Mujahid. He's from the Tabi'een, but he didn't actually hear from Hanâ. So there's a break in the chain. So the stronger opinion from the ulama is that that's a weak hadith. But again, we don't need it. We have the earlier hadith that's authentic, and it's clear that the water was mixed with something. And also we can use another hadith that we talked about, I think, earlier, that Ibn Abbas mentioned when he was at Hajj. There was a man standing on Arafah, and he fell off his animal, and it injured him fatally, or it killed him. So the Prophet ﷺ said to wash him with water and sidr, and this is narrated by Al-Bukhari and Muslim. أغسلوه بماء وسدر. So this is also another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ is commanding them to use water that's mixed with something that's Tâhir, but it didn't change it to the point where it's a different substance, so it's also still usable. And then we'll talk about a few, we've seen the evidences for this, so now I'll just talk about some of the opinions. Just so we can see the other side, and because other evidences might change your mind to the opposite way, and then we can talk about it. So the first opinion is that it's Tâhir and not Tuhûr. So we talked about this earlier. So what is when we divide water into three categories? What does Tâhir and what does Tuhûr mean?
Tâhir is the one it's still clean, but it can be used, right? And Tuhûr is it's clean and it can be used,
right?
And the Najâsah in the waters.
It's not, yeah. So that's the first opinion. So if something's mixed with another substance, then it becomes Tâhir and not.
For the live person and the dead person, you use the same thing. No, but then he mixed the water purposely with his daughter died.
Yeah.
So how is that? And that's related by the group. So. And it's authentic hadith, and he mixed it, and it's still valid. So why would they say it's Tâhir and you can't use it?
Sometimes they'll give exceptions. They'll say only this thing.
But is that really strong though?
To me, it's not.
No, it doesn't.
Because if you're going to say it's only this, well, I'm going to say, well, no, it's mixed with something. Yeah. You have to prove it's only this.
Exactly.
Because it's still water. It hasn't changed it. It doesn't make it najis, and it's used for this. Or they might say, well, no, this is for a dead person. But then, why is it only for a dead person? Yeah. So that's the first opinion, and those are the people who take it, or the madhahib. And the argument that they use is the ayah. So they say about فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً فَتَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا, or that if you do not find water, then use clean high ground. And they give sort of an argument, based on opinion. They say, so if something that is najis comes in the water, it makes it najis. So it takes away the fact that the water is clean and the fact that it can clean, which we would agree. If it changes the water, then we would agree. And they say another thing, which is soil or dirt, it doesn't change either. That if dirt or soil or sand mixes in the water, it's still clean and you can still use it for Tahârah. And then they say there's a third category of things, which is other stuff that's Tâhir, that would take away the characteristic of using it, but it's still clean. So they use that argument. But to me personally, it just,
Doesn't really make sense. Yeah.
But even if it made sense, then we just say, but we don't accept those types of things when we have texts from the Quran and the Sunnah.
Yeah.
Once we have a text, all those types of opinions and that stuff, like we don't try to fit the text to our opinion.
Yeah.
We change our opinions based upon the text. So if someone had that opinion and then they see a text, they should change their opinion instead of saying that, well, no, the hadith doesn't mean that. It doesn't fit with this rule and it doesn't make sense. That's what I'm
saying. It doesn't make sense because if the text is saying otherwise and the opinions, like you said, they have to be changed to fit the text, not the text to change.
Exactly, yeah. So that it doesn't make sense from that point.
Yeah.
So that's the first opinion. And then the second opinion is that it's Tuhûr. So like you had mentioned, that Tuhûr is usable and it's clean in and of itself. And that's the opinion of the Ahnâf, so the Hanafi madhab, Imam Ibn Hazm and Imam Ibn Taymiyyah. And the evidence that they also use the ayah. So you can see here they're both using the same ayah to prove their point. So the others are saying, well, no, the ayah proves that unless it's completely pure water mixed with nothing, you can't use it. That's the first opinion. The second opinion is saying, no, as long as we call this water, it's usable.
Because the ayah doesn't specify.
Just says water.
Yeah, just says water.
So as long as you pick up something and say, well, no, this is water, how can you tell me I can't use it when the ayah says if you don't find water, I have water here, I can use it. So that's the argument. So, which personally to me it seems strong. And then they also use the hadith from Ibn Abbas that we just talked about in Hajj, and the hadith from Atiyah, both where the Prophet ﷺ washed, or told or instructed that the dead bodies be washed with water mixed with certain types of pure elements. And also we have narrations from the Sahaba mixing things in their water to perform ghusl. So when they would perform ghusl, they would mix certain things in the water when they would wash their hair. So there's a hadith from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu when he was talking about ghusl, and they would call it khatami, and it was a type of like a flower. They call it hollyhock in English. So they would mix this in because it would give the water a nice smell. So they would use it when they would wash their hair. So Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu was talking about what if someone made ghusl and washed their hair with water mixed with this substance. He said, يُجْزِئُهُ أَنْ لَا يُعِيدُ عَلَى رَأْسِهِ الْغَسْلِ, so that it's sufficient for him that he doesn't have to rewash his hair. So this proves that the Sahaba understood if something was mixed in with the water, then it's sufficient. He doesn't have to go then wash his hair again with water that isn't mixed with anything. So again, this shows we have the texts, and here we have the Sahaba actually doing it or stating that they would do it. So there's no real room after that for anyone to disagree with it. And the hadith, it's narrated by Ibn Abi Shayba, and it's sahih. It's authentic. And also there's a Hasan narration as well from Abdullah bin Mas'ud about the same substance, this hollyhock, that he said, "Man ghassala ra'sahu bil khatami wa huwa junub faqad ablagha al ghusl." Or whoever washes his head with khatami, then he has gone far. He has gone to the limit of his ghusl. So meaning he's done well in how he's done it.
Hasan's the lowest part of authentic, right?
Yeah. Or some will say Hasan li ghayrihi, so meaning two actually weak hadith strengthened each other. But yeah, they're both of the same category. So for those two opinions, what do you guys think? If something's mixed in the water, that's Tâhir. What do you guys think? You can use it or you can't use it?
It's clear you can still use it. All the evidence is pointed you can use it.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the end of that subsection. It's quite quick. There's not too much discussion on it. Any questions before we go about these topics?
Did you go through the najis already?
No. So the next thing that he says water mixed with impure elements. So water mixed with najâsah. So he says we can divide this category into two subcategories. And so the first one, he says, the impure substance alters the taste, color, or smell or odor of the water. He says in this case it cannot be used for purification. According to Ibn al-Mundhir and Ibn al-Mulaqqin, there's a consensus on this point. So meaning there's ijma', and like we talked about, or we didn't actually talk about it in detail, just a bit about the Sahaba. If one of the evidences in the Sharia is consensus, so if the Ummah agrees on something, then we know that it's correct. And it's not. This isn't the section for, or the topic for it, but just about ijma', like there's evidence from the Quran and from the Sunnah that ijma' is considered to be an evidence in the Sharia. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَن يُشَاقِقِ الرَّسُولَ مِن بَعْدِ مَا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُ الْهُدَى وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, or whoever contradicts or opposes the messenger, Allah and His messenger, after the
guidance.
The guidance has been made clear to him, and he follows other than the way of the believers. So meaning if the believers, who are the Muslims, agree on something, that's their way. So if you follow something other than that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised or threatened you with punishment. So they use this verse to show that consensus is an evidence. And also there's the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, لا تزال طائفة من أمتي ظاهرين على الحق, or that the Prophet ﷺ said there will never cease to be a group from my ummah openly upon the truth. So we know that regardless of what time or what the ummah is going through, there will always, any opinion or any topic, there will be someone who's correct on that topic. So if everyone agreed on the topic, then we know that not only was the one person or the one group who was correct, the whole ummah was correct on it, or the whole ummah had agreed, so we know that this opinion is correct. So those are just a couple evidences, one from the Quran and one from the Sunnah, about the ijma' being an evidence. So here when they say that a najasa falling into water is unusable and it becomes najis if one of these categories is changed, he says that this is a matter of consensus. So that's the point of him mentioning that it's a matter of consensus, because even if we don't have something clear from the Quran and the Sunnah to prove this, the fact that all of the Muslims have agreed upon that shows that that's the correct point.
Color, smell, and taste. Right?
And taste, yeah. And he mentioned two people who had stated the ijma', so Ibn al-Mundhir and Ibn al-Mulaqqin. But it's also mentioned by many other ulama, at-Tahawi in Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar, and Ibn Nujaym in al-Bahr al-Ra'iq, and al-Baji in al-Muntaqa, and al-Shafi'i in al-Umm, and al-Nawawi in al-Majmu', and Ibn Qudam in al-Mughni, and Ibn Taymiyyah in al-Majmu' al-Fatawa, and Ibn Hibban in al-Ihsan fi Taqrib Sahih Ibn Hibban. So it's like it's his sunan or his Sahih, but it was changed in the orders. It's kind of a side topic. And al-Bayhaqi in al-Sunan al-Kubra, and Ibn Abd al-Barr in al-Tamheed, and al-Iraqi in Tarh al-Tathrib. So these are ulama from all of the madhahib have mentioned that there's a consensus on this topic. So really there's no need to have a discussion on that, because there's no differences of opinion on that. So the author continues, he says, the liquid is still considered water, meaning that the impure substance hasn't altered its taste, color, or odor. Such water is considered pure and may be used for purification. This is based upon the following hadith. And then so he says, so meaning if water falls into it, if najasa falls into it but it doesn't change anything. So you say there's a lake and someone urinates in it. The lake it didn't change anything from it. Sure, we say yes, so there's najasa fell in it, but the odor would still be the same as it was before. It's same with the smell and same with the taste. It wouldn't actually change it.
So it's still Tâhir and you can use it.
It would still be Tâhir, yeah. And then he says, so he mentions the evidence now. He says, the hadith, أن أبا هريرة قال قام أعرابي فبال في المسجد فتناوله الناس فقال لهم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم دعوه وهريقوا على بوله سجلا من ماء أو ذنوبا من ماء فإنما بعثتم ميسرين ولم تبعثوا معسرين. Or the hadith from Abu Hurairah that he said, a Bedouin stood up in the masjid and urinated. So the people gathered around him to get him or to stop him. So the Prophet ﷺ said, leave him and pour a bucket or a container of water over his urine. You have been sent or raised up to be easy on the people and not to be hard on them. And then he says it's narrated by the group except Muslim. So meaning Al-Bukhari, An-Nasa'i, Abu Dawud, At-Tirmidhi, and Ibn Majah. So this hadith, how do they understand this hadith to mean that if najasa goes in the water but doesn't change it, that it's still Tâhir?
Water cleans the najasa. Like water is more powerful than najasa.
But for them to say if it doesn't change it though,
you can still use it.
Or that it's still considered Tâhir.
Because لأنه طهر المكان.
Yeah, because if just it being in the water made it najis, then it wouldn't be able to clean it, right?
Yeah.
The fact that it went away and it took everything and there was enough to make it not there anymore means that it cleaned the place. So like you said, it cleans it took away the najasa. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to clean najasa then. If any water touching najasa made the water najis, regardless, I mean, there would be no way of getting away from it.
Exactly. So the water we'd be using to clean najasa would become najis.
As soon as it touches it, and now all that's, I mean, it would,
just adding more najasa.
Yeah. So that's the first hadith that they mention, or that the author mentions. The second one is he says from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri that he said, سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو يقال له إنه يستقى لك من بئر بضاعة وهي بئر يلقى فيها لحوم الكلاب والمحايض وعذر الناس فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الماء طهور لا ينجسه شيء. Or that the Prophet ﷺ, it was from Abu Sa'id that someone said to the Prophet ﷺ that he was given water. In some narrations it says to drink, and some that it was for wudu. But he was given water from this well called Bi'r Buda'a, or the well of Buda'a, and it was a well that people used to throw all their najasa in. So they the najasa from the people would end up in this well. So whether it was their when they would relieve themselves, or the things that they would collect for the menstrual blood, or the dead animals and dogs and stuff, they would eventually end up in this well. So they told the Prophet ﷺ about this, and that he was drinking from the water from that well. And in other narrations, they asked him if they can make wudu from the water from that well. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Verily, the water is Tuhûr, and it doesn't become najis by anything."
This is authentic.
That's authentic, yeah.
So that's not kind of. Remember how we discussed jumping in a pond?
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. I mean, like we said, the strongest opinion is if the water hasn't changed or something, to the point where it's najis now, even if we use it, it's still usable. Whether we say, we won't jump in a pond and make ghusl, because the Prophet ﷺ told us not to, that's one issue.
As long as it's still water.
As long as it's still water, it's still usable. So not doing it because he told us not to is one issue, and not being able to use it because it's najis is a completely other issue.
Okay.
So that's the problem.
I'm
Very
just
often
picturing a well and just najasa going in it. So the well is very, very small.
It's
not
contained.
Yeah.
So that hadith is sahih. It's authentic.
Yeah.
So then wouldn't that prove the other points we were discussing earlier? He said that nothing impurifies the water.
Yeah.
So you can always use water.
As long as it's water.
As long as it's still considered water.
And as long as the najasa hasn't taken over one of its characteristics, so it doesn't.
Well, that would make it not water anyways, right? So.
Or it would be water, but it has najasa. I mean, so then, as you're making wudu, you're concerned, or you're certain that I'm putting najasa on my body now, because it smells like it and tastes like it, or so. I mean, so it would be mixed in with it.
Jump in the pond, but you can if you really want.
That's valid? If you want to make ghusl, you can just go submerge your whole body in a pond or a lake.
It would be valid,
yeah.
But we shouldn't do it because the Prophet ﷺ told us not to.
Oh, okay.
So it would be haram to do, but so you'd be sinful for the disobeying the hadith, but you could still do. You'd still be purified from your janaba. So that's why we say there's two separate issues. To always link them and say every time there's something that you shouldn't do means that the whole thing is invalid. That's like a weaker opinion. So they mention this hadith as well, and then the author continues. He says this hadith is related by Ahmad, Ash-Shafi'i, Abu Dawud, and Nasa'i, and At-Tirmidhi, who classed it as Hasan. And Ahmad said this hadith is sahih, And Yahya bin Ma'in and Muhammad ibn Hazm also classified it that as well. And he says this is also the opinion of Ibn Abbas, Abu Hurairah, Al-Hasan al-Basri, Ibn al-Musayyib, Ikrimah, Ibn Abi Layla, Al-Thawri, Dawood al-Zahiri, Al-Nakha'i, Malik, and others. And he says Al-Ghazali said, I wish Ash-Shafi'i's opinion was like Malik's. So here he's just continuing. He's proving that the hadith is authentic, which it is. It was accepted by Imam Malik or by Imam Ahmad and by Yahya bin Ma'in, who are two of the the top or of the ulama of hadith of the Salaf. And Imam at-Tirmidhi accepted it as well. He said it's Hasan. But here we see this phrase that he said, I wish Ash-Shafi'i's opinion was like Malik's. So we see that's a very strange thing. So meaning they would follow their madhab so much that
even though they're not convinced.
But then they would say, I wish Imam Malik's or Imam Shafi'i's opinion was like, because Imam Malik, his opinion had stronger evidence. So they would say, I wish it was like that.
Meaning that he'd still follow Shafi'i's opinion.
Even though he's not.
Allahu A'lam, but I mean, it would say, like, it shows how much they took their madhab to be such an important issue.
Yeah.
So those are two hadith that he mentions and then the discussion. And also just, I guess, a couple points. There's that hadith about water is pure and nothing makes it impure. There's an extra phrasing that some narrate that it says إِلَّا مَا غَيَّرَ لَوْنُهُ أَوْ طَعْمُهُ أَوْ رِيحَهُ, that except something that changes its smell, its taste, or its odor, or its color. This phrase of the Prophet ﷺ is weak. All of the ulama agreed upon that it's not from the Prophet ﷺ.
The extra phrase.
The extra phrasing. Yeah, but there's a consensus on it.
Yeah.
So do you know what I mean?
But there's a consensus on that if it does change.
If it does change,
then it's not valid.
Right. So
okay.
So they agree that this hadith is actually weak from the Prophet ﷺ, but they also agree that the rule that's mentioned in the hadith is correct.
Yeah. So that goes back to the beginning.
No, hold on, no. You said, sorry, the hadith is authentic. It's that last part about the color, the taste, and the smell that's weak.
That's weak, right? Yeah. So the other part is. So that's one point. So if someone ever mentions or this discussion comes up, you'll know that the hadith about the topic is weak, but it's still a matter of consensus that one of those things changing makes the water unusable and najas.
But the hadith itself, is authentic about nothing makes the water impure.
That's authentic.
Except the last phrase is weak.
So right. So some people would narrate it as the Prophet ﷺ said, or إِنَّ الْمَاءَ طَهُورٌ لَا يُنَجِّسُهُ شَيْءٌ. Other people would come and narrate it with إِنَّ الْمَاءَ طَهُورٌ لَا يُنَجِّسُهُ شَيْءٌ إِلَّا مَا غَيَّرَ لَوْنَهُ أو ريحه أو طعمه. But the people who narrate that extra phrase, they were weak,
so we
reject that part. But authentic people or acceptable people narrated the first part, so we accept the first part.
Okay.
Yeah. And then just to finish this this topic, we should understand that this hadith that we talked about earlier about Bir Buda'a, or the well of Buda'a, and all these things ending up in the well, that we should understand that this wasn't something that they did intentionally. So they wouldn't go take their najasa and throw it in this well. It would happen by streams coming and pushing it in or something like that. And we know this, it would get there somehow. Yeah. But they wouldn't intentionally do that. And we know because first of all, water wasn't widespread back then. So for the Muslimin to then go and throw all this najasa in the well where people drink water from, we wouldn't even do it. Now, with each other. So how about the Sahaba doing it with each other? Like it's unthinkable that they would do that type of thing. And also there's a hadith from Abu Hurairah that the Prophet ﷺ said, اتقوا اللاعنين قالوا وما اللاعنان يا رسول الله قال الذي يتخلى في طريق الناس أو في ظلهم. Or the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith of Abu Hurairah, avoid the two things which bring about curses. So they said, what are the two things that bring about curses? So he said, someone urinating in the path, in the people's path, or in their shade. So the Prophet ﷺ, is giving us a forbiddance or to stay away from the things that people would curse you for, which is if there was a shade where people sat under and someone came and urinated it under it, because now people aren't going to sit there and it's ruining this area for them, or in their path. If someone, there's a path and all of a sudden you come and there's someone, left their najasa in the middle of the sidewalk, like so you're gonna want to curse this person, like we're trying to walk here and this guy couldn't find a different place to go to the washroom, and So the Prophet, so if these types of things were forbidden, how could we then say that the Sahaba would go forget about the path or the shade? They would go to the water, what people need, and throw all their najasa in it. So that's just a point about that. And the hadith, it's authentic, it's narrated by Muslim. And then just the last hadith that the author mentions, he says, there is also a hadith from Abdullah bin Umar, in which the Messenger of Allah ﷺ is reported to have said, if there are at least 2 buckets or 2 containers of water, it will not carry any impurity. And he says this hadith is related by the 5. So the hadith is سئل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن الماء وما ينوبه من الدواب والسباع فقال صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا كان الماء قلتين لم يحمل الخبث. And then so he says this hadith is related by the 5. However, this hadith is muttarib in its chain of narrators and its text. Ibn Abdul Barr said in at-Tamheed, as for the opinion of a Shafi'i, which is based on this hadith, it is weak on scrutiny, and it is not confirmed by historical reports. So just what he's saying here is that there's a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ that he said, if water reaches 2 qullas, and we'll go into what a qulla is a different time, it's a type of a bucket or a type of a container, that nothing would make it najas. So he's saying some would use this to show that if najasa fell into water and it was a certain amount, it wouldn't affect it because there's so much water and it wouldn't change any of the characteristics. But then he says that this hadith is muttarib in its chain and its sanad. So do you guys know what muttarib means? Muttarib means when there's a confusion about there's a confusion about it. So meaning it's been narrated, the phrasing of the hadith has been narrated in numerous different ways that that would contradict each other, and we can't tell which is the stronger one.
Okay, so then, so in that case, what do you do with the hadith?
We wouldn't accept it then. Yeah. And also he's saying in the chain. So meaning also if you look at the chain, some people mention this chain, some people mention this chain. We can't tell which is the correct one. So he's saying that. And we'll get into this in another day, but the correct opinion is that this hadith it's an acceptable hadith. The earlier ulama accepted the hadith as being authentic. So we go to the salaf when it comes to looking at the hadith. So Imam Ahmad, Yahya ibn Ma'in, Ali ibn al-Madini, and Nasa'i, all these ulama of hadith that were earlier, we go to them before we would go to the later scholars. So inshallah we'll talk about the amount of water that a qulla is, and whether small amounts are changed by najasa or not, or large amounts are changed by najasa or not at another day.